The question I get most often from people in the workplace, how can I be better at what I do? And my answer is fairly consistent. And it's this: you could develop a stronger presence. There's a wise lady who said this to her granddaughter. She said, whether or not you're pretty at 16 is luck. She said, you have nothing to do with that. But she went on to say that if you're not beautiful at 66, you have nobody to blame but yourself. So what I'm saying is that presence over time can be built. And when you walk into a room, I don't know that I want you to have the kind of presence that just gets you noticed necessarily. I would like you to have the kind of presence that is respected for who you are and for what you do. But you have to be purposeful in doing it. In fact, think about a word that you would like people to use to describe you. Maybe it's decisive. I like that. Essential to your organization. Are you vital? In other words, someone would say, I don't know what I would do without him or her. Are you insightful? Are you a catalyst for change? Are you a finisher and not just someone who starts a bunch of things? And maybe the word you used was professional. Well, if it's professional or any one of these words, here's something else I want you to think about. I call this the law of personal packaging, L, A, and W. The L in law stands for your look. How do you look? If your word is professional, is there anything about the way you put yourself together that would add to that? The A is for actions. Anything about what you're doing that would be congruent or incongruent? Or how about your words? Because low and slow exudes confidence. And isn't it true that you want to have the kind of presence that exudes confidence? What we're really going for here is for you to have the kind of presence that when people look at you, they lean towards you. You put them in a position to receive you and not back away and resist you. So this comes with a warning, because I'll say this: presence is great, but it'll get you about 10 minutes. At some point, you have to tell people exactly what it is that you do. You have to have, let's just call it this, you have to have a message that goes along with your presence. I was working with some facilities managers at one point. These are the people that run the buildings and the stadiums for large universities. And I said, what do you do? And the answer was, we have the second largest budget and we take care of all the buildings. And I go, I don't really like it. He said, what do you mean? That's what we do. Second, I know, I heard you, but I don't really like it. Guy finally stands up and back. He says, you know what? He says, the way that we are so meticulous about our grounds and the way things look, he said, we allow coaches to recruit some of the finest talent in our country. I said, I like that. Another person goes, you know what? He said, we're so buttoned up in terms of our classrooms. He said, we allow our teachers to teach. And someone else said, you know what? Our classrooms are in such good working order that allows our students to learn. And I say, I like that a lot better. You see, once you throw in that emotion, it allows you to get your value proposition in there. And once you start to articulate that, it sounds a lot better. Because if you can't define what you do, other people will define you for you. And that's a slippery slope. Because I'm guessing they're not accurate all the time. So the groups that I work with, and sometimes it's a financial advisor, they'll give me paragraphs. Oh, I do this and this and this and this. The more you give me, the less memorable you become. So for one financial advisor who said, you know what, I make my clients money. Speaking to a group one time of people who run stores for a large retailer, I said, what do you do? And they thought about it, gave me lots of stuff. And one guy says finally, you know what? He says, I develop talent. And I said, well, what about the results that you need to get? He says, you know what? All that stuff takes care of itself if I'm developing the right talent. And he said, that's what I do every single day. I had a guy who was the vice president of innovation in here one time. He just gave me masses of stuff of what he did. Finally, we got it down to the point where he says, you know what? I drive change for both people and our organization. Chatting with a pastor one time, what do you do? Finally gets to the point where he says, you know what? I bring people closer to God. And then think about this one. A finance person for a large oil firm tells me all the things that he does, and finally he gets it down to the point where he says, you know what? He says, I make our firm stronger financially. And I think about that, and I go, that's good. How do you do that? And he says, well, I do that in a lot of ways. We do it every single day and every single way and all that. And I said, no, tell me how you do that. And he said, like right now? I said, yes. And then he starts to, stumble upon that just a little bit. And here's what I'll say. Presence and message are great, but it's still not enough. We elect people with a good, strong presence and a strong message. We hire people based on presence and message. But there's one more thing that we have to be able to do, which is to execute. Execution is a really big part of it. Somebody sometimes going to come to you and they're going to ask you to quantify what you've done, to prove what you've done, to give evidence upon what you've done. So this gentleman from the oil firm, which says, you know what, we make our firm stronger financially. I'm saying prove it. And after we spend enough time together, you know what, he's got this little book. And he says, well, I'm glad that you asked the question because there's a couple ways I can do it. First, are a little bit on the softer side. Some of the doors that we've opened. Some of the relationships that we've developed. And he said, and I know there's value to the fact that we're in good standing with the federal government. But he said, in terms of dollars, he said, I can say this, that based on some of the strategies we put in, some of our procedures and some of our processes over the last 18 months, we have saved this organization $261 million as a result of the work that we're doing in our department. And he shuts this thing and he says, if you want to know the specifics, they're all right here for you. And I said, oh, that's pretty good. The fact is, can you prove it? And you have to. Let me wrap this thing up. I mean, you want to build this presence, right? And what I would say is presence is great, but you have to be able to tell people what you do. Once you tell people what you do, you have to prove that you've actually done it. So you put those three things together, and all of a sudden things are really starting to happen. Because the next time, after you've done something and actually you executed on it, your presence becomes bigger. Your presence becomes stronger. You become more confident. And then the next time that you deliver this message, you do it differently because your message includes some of the things that you've executed on. The next time you go to execute something, well, you know what? They have more confidence in you to do it. They've given you more money. Your projects are bigger. And then the next time you do it and you go into a room, they're going to say, you know what? There's the person that did this. So with you comes what we would consider to be, a reputation. Now you can see how this starts to build on each other. Maybe now your title changes and your presence is different. Some people say to me, you know what? I'm not that good looking. I don't really have a strong presence. And with all due respect, I'll give you an example. If Bill Gates walked into this room today, you know what? Everybody would say, oh my gosh, it's Bill Gates. Do they say it because he's great looking? Not necessarily. I believe they would say it because of what he's done and what he's executed on. I watched on the biography channel one night. I saw something on Larry the Cable Guy. The whole, in 1 hour and a half, he must have said 10 or 20 times, he said, you know what? My whole deal, I'm going to make people laugh, make people laugh, make people laugh. So what he did, his message, I'm going to make people laugh, but he executed on it. And now he's the highest grossing comic in this country. So if you want to build a presence, you can do it through message, you can do it through execution, but all those things together will really start to build momentum for you and whatever it is that you represent. Last thing, you're thinking about this as you as a person, but once you really have this thing down, you can start to think bigger. Think about your department. What is our presence in our department? What is our message departmentally? And have we executed on things? Because now it starts to get out a little bigger. Think about your organization. Do we have the presence in the marketplace we want? What is our message and have we executed on that? And are we delivering that in terms of messaging as well as we could or should? Well, the fact is that the bigger you think, the stronger your presence is going to be as well. Whether or not you're pretty at 16 or good looking at 16 is luck. But I will say this to you. If you're not working right now on developing a stronger presence, then in time you will have nobody to blame but yourself.